In the village of Amani, there lived two best friends, Grace and Maria. Maria's parents took Grace in at a tender age when both her parents died in a fatal accident. Grace and Maria did everything together and were practically inseparable. After they finished their university, Grace and Maria moved in together and started their business together. Their business was doing very well, which made them very successful and wealthy. The only thing that was left for the two to do was to look for love and start their families. Maria already had a boyfriend whom they met at the university. Their relationship had been so good and they seemed to really love each other. Her boyfriend, Daniel, proposed to Maria and Maria accepted because she loved him very much. Grace was Maria's maid of honor at her very beautiful wedding, which was graced by many politicians, rich people, as well as poor people. Maria was loved by many due to her kind nature. After the festivities, Maria went to live with her husband since she was now a married woman, and for the first time, they lived separately with Grace. 3 years later, Maria's husband died in a tragic road accident. After the sad funeral of Daniel, Maria invited Grace to come and stay with her since she was now lonely. One day, as Grace and Maria were having lunch at their favorite restaurant, a very handsome man who was very muscular and elegantly dressed walked into the restaurant and had a seat at a table near them. Grace quickly noticed him and started giving him signals to come to their table. The man was interested and came to join them after sending a bottle of champagne to their table. Grace thought to herself, what a gentleman. The man came and greeted the two ladies and introduced himself as Calvin. Calvin, however, seemed more interested in Maria and was complimenting her endlessly. He even asked Maria out on an actual date and asked for her contacts. After several dates with Calvin, Maria seemed very happy yet confused. Maria started avoiding Calvin's calls. Grace was shocked by her best friend's behavior and asked why she was ignoring him, yet he hadn't wronged her. Maria said, "I don't want a man like my ex-husband." That statement shocked Grace because as far as she knew, her marriage with Daniel seemed flawless. Maria decided to open up to her and told her about how Daniel changed immediately they got married. He used to pick calls from other women even in her presence. He used to beat her so bad and abuse her. Grace was very much shocked because every time they met, Maria seemed fine. Maria told her that she had to put on tons of makeup and wear very long clothing to hide all the bruises that she had acquired from Daniel. Maria further continued that on the day of her husband's fatal accident, he had beaten her that morning and went to meet up with another woman. That afternoon is when she received a call from the police at the scene that her husband was involved in an accident. On rushing to the scene, the officers explained that her husband was in the company of a woman and they were both very drunk and caused the accident, which ended their lives. Grace was very confused at the ordeal her friend Maria went through. They both really cried and comforted each other. Grace assured Maria that Calvin was different and treated her very well, so there was no need to avoid him. He was a good man. Maria continued with her relationship with Calvin and they were happy. Calvin lived in a nearby city and invited Maria to visit him and spend some time with him. Maria thought it was a good time to test him to ascertain if he was genuinely in love with her or he was just playing games. He asked Calvin if it was okay to come with her best friend Grace, and Calvin agreed. Maria and Grace packed up and went to Calvin's place. On arrival, they were received well by Calvin and his sister Rachel. Rachel loved Maria so much, and after catching up with each other, she left to her place and left Grace, Maria, and Calvin at Calvin's house. Calvin gave Maria so many gifts on her arrival and was very romantic with her, and Grace was so happy for her best friend. The test was in motion, and Maria would leave to go to the gym or to the market, and Grace would try to seduce Calvin, which he blatantly refused to fall into temptation and passed the tests. One morning, Maria woke up and bid Calvin goodbye and went to the gym. Grace came as usual to the bedroom to try and seduce Calvin. After several attempts, Calvin got angry and left the bedroom and went to the living room. Grace followed Calvin to the living room and tried more, which pissed off Calvin. Grace went into the kitchen and grabbed a knife and came to the living room. Grace threatened to kill herself if he wouldn't accept her. Calvin was so shocked and ran out of the house and went to his sister's place. His sister Rachel was so shocked to hear all Calvin had been going through, and they devised a plan. That evening, Calvin asked Maria when her friend Grace would leave so that they would spend time alone, but Maria said that her best friend would leave when she leaves. Therefore, Grace would stay till Maria was ready to leave. Calvin didn't want to ruin their friendship by telling her the truth. He just said he wasn't comfortable anymore. Maria went and told Grace that since Calvin had passed the test, it was time to stop the tests. Grace had fallen for Calvin and felt very jealous of her friend Maria. She didn't stop with the tests, and when she went to seduce Calvin the next morning, Calvin obliged and kissed her back. Grace was so sure her plan had succeeded, and they started spending time together with Calvin. On Grace's birthday, Calvin bought her a very expensive gift and presented it to her in front of Maria and his sister Rachel. Calvin told her to receive the gift for she deserved it. Maria was very shocked at the statement than the actual gift itself. She asked Grace why Calvin said she deserved the gift. Calvin interrupted Maria and he told her that Grace was such a good friend and she deserved the gift because she agreed to follow Maria to her man's house and be available when needed. Maria was even more shocked. They went for the girl's birthday dinner, and during dinner, Grace, the birthday girl, asked to leave to go and meet a friend. Grace came back to the house and started cuddling and kissing Calvin. Maria and Rachel walked in and they were shocked at the sight of the intimate display on the couch. Grace jumped and pretended nothing was going on. Maria dragged Grace outside the house and asked her what was going on, and she asked her to stop the test a long time ago and why she was receiving gifts from her man. Grace smiled and said that it was nothing. The next day, Grace and Calvin went out together on a date. Calvin and Grace both didn't say where they were going, which shocked Maria. When Grace returned, Maria asked her if she was out with Calvin, which Grace denied and lied that she went to see a friend in town who had come from their village and even wanted to call them to prove that Maria was wrong. Maria had no other option but to apologize as she left Grace's room. The next day, as Maria was descending the stairs into the living room, she found her best friend Grace and Calvin kissing, and Grace was asking when Calvin would kick Maria out of the house. Maria fainted in shock and disbelief. When Maria woke up, Calvin asked her if she was ready for the truth, but Maria was very angry and went to Grace's room and told her to leave, which she didn't. She was so angry and told Calvin that she was leaving him and he was nothing but a cheat and a liar. Calvin told her that he knew everything about how she was married before, which she hadn't disclosed, and how she didn't trust him, that she sent her friends to seduce him and test him. He overheard them speaking and he decided to go along with it to prove how awful of a friend Grace was. Maria and Calvin had both hurt each other so bad, so Maria went to Calvin's sister to explain everything, but Rachel already knew and told her to relax. Grace had heard what Calvin said and got angry that she was used. This man thinks that he can use me and leave me like that. I will show him, Grace said to herself. Because Maria had gone to Rachel's place, Grace took the opportunity to tie Calvin and wanted to kill him. When Maria came back, she unlocked the door and she was suddenly hit from the back and she lost consciousness. When she woke up, she found herself and Calvin tied up and Grace was holding a gun, crying. Grace cried as she said, "You stole the man that I had my eyes on. You will die, and you, Calvin, you used me. You will all die today." Grace pointed her gun towards Maria, and just as she was about to shoot her, the police walked in with Rachel, Calvin's sister, and Grace was arrested. What did you learn from this story? Please tell us in the comment section.